Then for sharing, I mean, we have some data sets that are openly available on our GitHub account. If there's anyone who wants to like work with us in that space, we can talk.
Right, you have to squeeze the ad in there. Let's, if you're to just segue what he touched on earlier on, which is migration, trying to convince someone who has done something for time immemorial to migrate to some new system that for him is as tough as operating the Starship Enterprise. How do you convince them to get onto the next thing vis-a-vis the lack of credit scoring, like he's touched on, well, with the exception of him? Isn't it a tough space?
Well, given the fragmented nature of the Ugandan ecosystem in terms of access to data, you will have to rely on someone that already has this data in place. So like Solomon said, for him, his platform is helping capture that information. But you also have to look at entities that already have that data and see how you can partner with them. You have the banks, you have the payment processors, you have entities like Umeme, MTN, Airtel. So this is a source of information. Even you have URA. So if you could somehow tap into this information and just analyze it, then you could come up with a competitive aspect on how you can lend or reach more people in terms of how you give this credit and loans.
Lynn, he's mentioned URA, and last I interacted with a few guys, well, this might get me in trouble, but a few guys were saying that they would not want to disclose some of this information because that would subject them to even more tax. I just want to understand, do you sit on the fence in your line of work where you're thinking, these guys are not about to actually enroll because they don't want to pay more taxes, but you want them to migrate, like you had touched on before. Where do you sit on this, Lynn?
I think things to do with data, that has always been sensitive in our market. But the fact that people need to understand that the data is used, like Solomon said, for credit scoring. So I think the logical thing to do is for business to just try and collaborate with the bodies like URA, as you said, to have all this information just functionalized.
Right. If we're to come back to you, Stella, there's an issue when it comes to SMEs as a whole and the risk. And I'm glad we actually have someone who is in your space because last I checked, the non-performing loans, according to Bank of Uganda, agriculture has always sat somewhere that is not very comfortable for any of us in this room to accept, yet it is employing close to, 70% of the Ugandan population. Is that what informed your decision to get into that particular space? And what is a win-win scenario in your line of work 10 years down the road? Do you see those NPLs coming down? Just tell me what keeps you up at night.
Actually, what keeps me up at night is having some of these organizations not understanding the rule setting in the country. You find we are having a loan sitting at KCB or DFCU Bank, but the criteria for acquiring that loan does not fit anywhere with the smallholder farmer. The smallholder farmer has to have a farm name, or has to have a location, geomapped land, and on top of everything, that loan is actually not for agriculture. That loan, if you are to access it, you have to have a different collateral rather than the crop of maize that you are actually planting. And so my idea with my business partner was, can we actually get smallholder farmers to have their information about what their crop they have had. They have harvested 2 bags of maize after 120 days. Can that information in 6 months be used for me to actually acquire credit? Maybe not from these banks, but from other financial institutions that actually can lend using my crop, my produce. You use a check-off system. I bring 10 bags of maize. Next time you say, okay, you've been bringing 10 bags of maize. How much land do you have? So we profile that land. And then we realize that actually you have enough land to make 20 bags. But because you don't have financial credit to actually plant more, then you actually will never make more. So we have come up with a whole, like Moja Loop, because we have come up with a whole loop. Talk to agro dealers who are sitting with seeds and they're not being able to give them away, give them out on credit because they don't have information enough on smallholder farmers. Also talk to people with tractor services that could actually help you open land so you can plant more, because these farmers are not known. So by profiling a smallholder farmer and their farmer group and keeping their records, we don't need 10 years, we just need 1 to 3 years. They will have enough information for credit scoring. You will be able to notice that, look here from Chengegwa has been actually consistently every 120 days, she brings in bags of maize, she plants soybean, you know the value chain that she's going into, and when she takes seeds, she brings back, she actually makes sure that she gives you 2 bags to replace, to pay for those seeds. So by using produce and by seeing the production that this smallholder farmer is taking, I think credit scoring will be very, very, it's a good thing that someone will look at, because you know how much she produces, you know how much she takes in, you've looked at the credit she's been taking, and you can now credit score her.
Solomon, I want you to just come in here, then George and Malcolm, you'll just pitch in after. It's one thing to touch credit scoring, because for me, I get the sense that you kind of are the glue that kind of patches all of us here together. If, of course, credit scoring gets to work in the country perfectly and seamlessly. And from what she's explaining, is this the beginning of maybe us having conversations about alternative funding mechanisms for SMEs? It's very painful when I listen to such conversations and all we ever talk about are banks. Where are the angel investors? Where are the venture capitals? Where are the PEs? Where's the private equity? And that's where you come in.
I mean, I think the conversation has to start when the different stakeholders or different players actually look at the opportunities that we actually have at our doorsteps right now. So like, you'll find that this is something everybody has heard about before, like SMEs still contribute to more than 50% of GDP in an emerging market, 60% of employment. But when you go to a bank and you want SME looking for 300,000, that's a small ticket size for Stanbic Bank to look at. Stanbic Bank is looking at a Mokwano wants like $3 billion or whatever. Yeah, that might be like a very big number. But like at a very aggregated level, if you have 1,000 or 3,000 SMEs looking for 300,000 each, it's something a branch can actually front every month, right? So for me, I believe we are getting to a point where banks might listen or they might be phased out. There's a saying I usually have every time we have a meeting at office. Banking is relevant as a rationale, but the banks might not be relevant in the long run. You have people like Eversend right now, I don't bank with my bank anymore, apart from business banking. For me, every money I get, I withdraw from my card onto my Eversend account. Why? Because to transact on Amazon, I have to first call my bank, then my banking, whatever, has to contact the manager, then they let my card work, right? So we're getting to a point where solutions are being built by the people who are facing the problems themselves. And banks either have to listen or they might not be relevant.
George and Malcolm, I want you to come in here, cognizant of the fact that I remember just last year, Standard Bank, is the parent company for Stanbic Bank Uganda. In 2019, I remember they closed close to 19 branches in South Africa overnight, just like this. Because people just don't walk into the banks anymore. You have an app, you do everything. But when do we start this conversation around alternative funding mechanisms and just think outside the orthodox box of this is a bank, there's an ATM, I have a checkbook? George, Malcolm.
Probably one of my biggest frustrations or challenges with banks is they have a chicken-egg scenario. So I always ask them, at what point will I be interested for you to look at my business? Is it when I'm the chicken or when I'm the egg? And most of them prefer the chicken. And it does not make sense. I will not need you when I've succeeded. I need you from the very beginning. So banks have to change their mindset. One, they have to understand the business or hire the appropriate people who are expertise so that they can analyze and understand the business and probably look at the future it has. that is my take on banking. And like Solomon says, banking will eventually phase out, because you're having big corporations like Google getting into the space, Amazon and so on and so forth, and they have cash of money to play with. You can look at China, Alipay, and so on and so forth. So to me, if banks do not tailor their services to actually meet the needs of the businesses or try to understand the businesses, then there's going to be a problem. And then you also look at, I think recently, Eversend raised money through their crowdsourcing platform. So it's only a question of time before such models come to Uganda. However, the issue is that for crowdfunding to also work, you would need a trusted entity that basically a trusted entity that who everyone believes in, who everyone thinks they'll get their returns from when they put that money into that basket. So again, banks still have an opportunity to play that role, but if they do not, then we believe someone else can come up. I think we have the Ugandan Stock Exchange Security
I was going to go
that
there.
can also come in and probably play that role.
Right.
We also have different entities, or probably government can also decide to come and play that role. So the opportunities are many. So again, it's a question of, can banks understand us?
And of course, the chicken and the egg. Just over to you. To just touch on that particular issue, if you had anything to actually add on.
Not right.
Okay, he's done all the good talking. Lynn, COVID-19 has just changed the entire landscape. I would have thought everyone is really shaking, from Silicon Valley to Nigeria. The whole landscape has just changed. Is this a window of opportunity for us to actually rethink? And if we are to hit the reset button, we actually have 5 minutes. As always, a good thing just flies by. If we were to reset the whole paradigm, give me a sense of, maybe all of you could just touch this in just 1 minute. Give me a sense of what a good scenario might look like post-COVID-19 for SMEs after we hit a reset button. And what would that reset button look like for SMEs? Lynn, let me start with you.
Okay, so basically COVID-19 has seen many small businesses, for example, getting stuck, and businesses are now eroded. You find that people who are operating in brick and mortar locations have now been put out of business because of the guidelines that the government put up to keep all of us safe. So you find that the companies or the businesses that were already operating online had little or less interference when it came to COVID-19, because, hey, they could still sell their products and services online and have them delivered to their customers without any worry. So the convenience was there for them. So this gives us a lot to think about as businesses, especially SMEs, that we can always tap into the digital market. I mean, when it comes to Center, we are always saying, we look at the world in two basically broad economies, right? We have the old economy where the systems are inefficient, people are using cash, people have to move from point A to point B to transact, they have to pay for rent, and then we have the new economy where businesses are just using cashless options, right? Mobile money, you're using your bank card, and everything is just seamless. And we're saying, hey, in Africa right now, 99% of these businesses are still operating with cash, using the old model, and things are inefficient. They cannot even compete favorably when it comes to the developed economies, because they are catching up real fast. So our goal at Center is to basically get each and every one. Actually, our vision is to connect 1 million Africans to the digital global economy so they are able to compete more favorably.
Right.
And because of the pandemic, we've seen more and more businesses, actually small businesses, are signing up with Center just to be listed. And with our partnership with the Innovation Village, we are going to onboard about 4,000 small businesses that were previously having physical locations and put them on an online platform. And yeah, I think that will change a whole lot better when it comes to the economy.
Right, Solomon, George, and Malcolm, very, very briefly, just give me a sense of what a golden egg looks like for SMEs with the COVID-19 pandemic. What I'm asking for is, look at Zoom. Before all of this, well, Zoom was trading on the stock exchange, yes, but the stock just shot up over 80% overnight. So just give me a very, very two-liner on that, then we hand over.
I may use more words, but I mean, at the end of the day, businesses have to pivot. You have to collaborate. There's no need for you to reinvent the wheel. There are so many partners. There's Pegasus, there is Zente, there are so many people you can rather collaborate with. The pie is big. So to me, that's my new golden egg.
Solomon? That's a very long list of things that you wrote, hey?
I think for me, I'll say we don't have to reset. Away from the lockdown, I don't want to stay home anymore. We should stay, everything should like continue the way it is right now. We've seen businesses grow from zero to something during the lockdown. Almost everyone has actually gotten to a point where they know you have to sell online. Us as a company grew from just moving 10K a month to 25K, meaning there's more businesses that are coming on board and trying to move money cashlessly. Everyone knows if I'm in Charlie Wajal, I can still buy from a person at Akasha Mall and all. So I don't think I would love to have a reset button for this. It might be selfish, but I think it's actually a step in the right direction. Things we've been preaching about for the last bunch of years.
Right.
The crisis has brought the potential benefits, even though there are challenges. You may find like to the smaller fintech, there are a lot of unperforming loans. Some of them, they're being bought by the bigger ones. But to those who have struggled to go through the crisis, I think there's need for a much struggle.
Right.
Because you may find like most of the smaller fintechs haven't even registered a single transaction. They have, let's say to the fintechs which have been handling maybe lending, to those who have been accepting payments, let's say the hotels. So you may find like they haven't registered any single transaction, but that is not the end. I think we have time because the digitalization is here to stay. So
right.
Still there's a big gap.
Thanks for that. Stella, you could wrap it up.
Yeah, I think we should digitize SMEs that are still actually doing manual records. Taking a taxi to work is now very expensive. We think that we should digitize. We should work on answering some of these calls that actually can get you some funding so that you can move a step ahead.
Many thanks for that. That's where we leave it for this edition. We're talking SMEs. I'm Arnold Sagawa. On the panels, please join me in thanking, to my left, Hamway East Africa co-founder, that's Stella Lugalambi. Then we also do have Lynn Tuke, who's the Chief Marketing Officer on my extreme left for Sente. Then George Katulamu, who's the Director for Tsopa. I keep on wanting to say Tsopa. Milan Group, Castillo Malcolm, who's the founder and CEO for Milan Group. And Swipe to Pay, Solomon Kitumba, who is the founder. And he also made it very clear that, yeah, things are looking good. They moved from 10,000 to 25,000. So if you need a loan, I think Solomon is a guy to run to. Arnold Sagawa, thank you for making time to speak to us.
Thank you, Arnold, and the team at large. Another applause for them as Arnold leads them to the photography moment. Please, you can follow him for the photography moment outside. Thank you so much. And hello, once again, good morning. And we're trending on Twitter in East Africa at large. The hashtag, the 40 Days 40 Fintechs project, very trending, and we're the #1 in East Africa. And great news coming in from the CEO High People for the women, in case your tweet gets onto the first, you have got a very free ticket to the women in Fintech, which is another upcoming event organized by High People. It needs a hand clap, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Right now, we're going in for the keynote speech about the evolution of Uganda's fintech landscape, and it's going to be strictly 10 minutes for the keynote address, and brought to you by Ronald Azaire. Ladies and gentlemen, a hand clap for Ronald Azaire as he comes onto the panel to take us through.
Now it's on, right? Okay, great. Good morning. Where the energy level is so low, what is it Bad breakfast? Okay, my name is Ronald Azeirwe. I'm one of the founders and currently the managing director of Pegasus Technologies. And I'm honored to give a keynote address. Again, I have about 11 slides in 10 minutes. That's about 0.9 minutes for every slide. So let's do this. I don't know if I need glasses. I'm growing old, I think. Much better. Okay, so let's start off with a few interesting stats. And by the way, these stats were taken from Credit Goes to FSDU. I think this paper was done in 2017. And it throws up some very interesting stats that we might want to look at before we look at the evolution of fintechs. In Uganda, they were saying there were currently 70 fintechs. That's at 2017. I don't know if that number's gone up or come down. We'll look at that. And about 35% have been in operation in the last 2 years, so since 2015, and you can see the growth that's happened there. Payments, the largest area of fintechs in Uganda, and fintechs were contributing a volume of about 17.6 trillion. Just to put that figure into context, how much does Euro collect in a single year compared to that? I think it's about even. That's about how much taxes the government collects in a single year. The next largest fintechs in Uganda are the banking infrastructure, investment savings, and so on and so forth. About 60% of the fintechs that currently operate in Uganda are native. I think that's a very good thing. About 60% of the fintechs are native to Uganda. 21% are more generally focused in sub-Saharan Africa, while the rest are global fintechs. So we have only about 19% that are foreign, out of Africa, for that matter. Now, that slide was about Uganda. This slide is about Africa in general. There are over 300 fintechs in Africa. Now, if Uganda contributes about 70 of those, I think that's a decent conversion. We are looking at almost 40% of the total number of fintechs. So I think that's a very decent conversion. More than half the fintechs, again, are startups less than 2 years old. That's a bit of a frightening statistic, but I'll tell you also why it's a very exciting one. So again, Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya, of course, they lead. Over 40% of fintechs in Africa focus on solutions in the payments and remittances space. And this is not by chance, this is by design. And again, we'll see why it's by design, but largely, most of them do payments and remittances. As of December 2017, venture capitalists funded over 150 deals and invested over 100 million shillings in fintechs in Africa. I don't know how much of that money came into Uganda, the $100 million. But let's move on. So, quickly, the evolution of fintechs is tied to the evolution of banking as an industry. Again, largely because the word fintech, again, speaks about financial technology. So it's really technology that enhances financial activities. And traditionally, financial activities were tied to banks. Either banks, again, banks being the medium through which economies operated, whether it's putting cash into the economy or pulling cash out of the economy, and so on and so forth. So the evolution of fintechs really is tied to the evolution of banking. If you look at the slides I have up there, traditional banking was typically about deposits and withdrawals, and to a small extent, and I'm addressing myself purely to Ugandan cases, they were also a bit down to remittances. If you wanted money sent from abroad or whatever, then the banks did that for you. So those were the three largest products that banks did. Of course, plus or minus a couple of others like loans and savings and so on. But really it was about deposits, withdrawals, and international remittances. In the mid-2000s, the banks began to morph. They began to realize, and the team here was alluding to it, that the banks need to stay relevant. So in 2000s, they moved a bit into things like electronic transfers. Okay, that was an addition. Card services, yes, but by 2000, I remember I was in my first job at Standard Chartered Bank, and they had a small section called a card center where they had this preloaded card that you loaded, but were only able to use at a couple of locations, I think hotels and fuel stations. So about 2000, card services began to come. And of course, ATM cards were already in existence, but we're talking about cards that are not just ATM cards. With the advent of mobile money in 2009, we saw a big shift in the way banking was done. Whether this was to counter the movement or the move of mobile technologies, or it was purely a natural progression, is something we can debate. But about 2000s, we began to have peer-to-peer transfers. We did bill payments. Banks could now do bill payments. You could walk to your branch over the counter and pay your bill. And of course, value-added services, USSD, SMS, and so on and so forth. And again, most of these I argue it was a reaction to the way mobile money had changed the landscape. The reinvention of mobile money, after its growth, largely now, forced banks and the fintech industry to go beyond just peer-to-peer transfers into things like bulk payments, bill payments, collections, mobile savings and investment, and mobile healthcare. Okay, and there are many fintechs I'm here represented, I'm sure, that are already in most of those things. What's the statistic there is a very interesting one, that right now we have about 21 million mobile money wallets. That's not users, that's mobile money wallets. To put that into perspective, all bank accounts in Uganda, including government bank accounts, including company accounts, and companies here that have over 10 accounts and so on, 20 accounts. The total number of bank accounts is about 4 million. So you have 4 million bank accounts, you have 21 million mobile money wallets. And we're not talking about wallets like Zente and other wallets like Eversend and so on. These are just mobile wallets run by mobile network operators. So I think that's a very interesting statistic for us that are in the fintech space. So there's quite a lot of potential and growth in there. Now, historically, again, this wagon wheel is by no means exhaustive, but largely this is a space that fintechs play in. We're doing e-commerce, we're doing wallets, we're doing merchant collections, we're doing school fees collections, we're doing savings, we're doing bill payments, we're doing bulk payments, we're doing agriculture value chain digitization. My friend here was speaking about that, and maybe we need to get in touch after. Agency banking, e-banking, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole host. This is really a representation of many other things that can be built on top of this wagon wheel. But largely this is the space in which the current fintech industry is playing. The pioneers, what were the challenges at the time we started? And I see a few familiar faces here. We started together, young men. 2006, 2007, I think your Uganda is one face I recognize. I don't know if many of you here were in that space yet. But yes, so in 2006, even before the advent of mobile money, is where, with the first bill payments API, is where we trace the origin of many of the fintechs. What were our challenges at the time? There was mistrust from the establishment. Again, people did not understand what this whole thing was about. Imagine going to an organization like Umeme or National Water and telling them, shut your cash offices, let banks do the collections for you. So customers should no longer be able to come here and pay their water bill, or should no longer come here to pay their electricity bill. I was very frightful for many of those establishments, and many of them resisted it. they felt it was, breaking with tradition. So many of them mistrusted the solution. Many of them thought they would lose that interface with a customer, and it took a lot of convincing for them to understand the value of that. Of course, most of the startups, myself inclusive, when we started, we didn't have a data center. I remember the very first water collection system was running off a PC somewhere ducked away. There was no firewall, there was nothing, and that's what it was. So most of the fintechs lacked the facilities. Again, it was a very nascent industry. Not many people believed in it, and so those were some of the issues. Fintechs were all startups. We've had some of the stories about startups. No capital, no money, just good ideas and nothing whatsoever in terms of infrastructure. So all the problems associated with startups really affected us. There was poor infrastructure. 2006, those that remember well, I think we were still running 2G, and that was really high-end. But we were still using GPRS and Edge and so on. Very, very poor technology. There was no national backbone right now that you people are enjoying. I think all internet was done by satellite at the time. So the under cable internet from SIMs and Teams were not here yet. So first of all, it was very, very expensive affording internet, but also it wasn't there. You had to, there were few service providers and so on. So poor infrastructure. There were not hardly any leased lines. If you got that was very expensive. Many of the industry players didn't have APIs, and we'll talk about things like the way Mojaloop with the open API revolutionizes the industry, but at the time there were no APIs. So you actually had to go to the institution, help them create APIs, then come outside and consume those APIs to be able to deliver service. So it had its benefits as well, because then now you are on the inside, so it had its benefits. There was very low penetration of mobile money. Of course, first of all, this was before the advent of mobile money, but even at the advent of mobile money, the penetration was still low. So there were very few users that could use the services that you put out there, which was very discouraging for the people we had to convince to open up for mobile money payments. There was low technology in the market. Smartphones were not here yet, or if they were very few. There was a BlackBerry and so on. Poor demand for digital services and payments. Again, traditionally people were used to cash. It was hard to tell someone you can actually collect e-value and deliver goods and services and then cash it out later. So people would say, I'd rather take cash. Those are some of the things we had to battle with at the beginning. And then, of course, the culture of face-to-face interactions, which very many people gave attendance to. But we had our own benefits. There were few and far between. Does this style work? Next slide, please. Okay, sorry. We had a few opportunities. One of the very first was that there was fallow ground. It was virgin territory. There was hardly anything. So whatever idea you dreamed up, you could just go there and make it work. So that was very important for us. There was very little competition. Again, like I said, I can name only about 5 fintechs at the time, and most of them were Kenyan fintechs that didn't really think Uganda was any market to go into. So with the exception of a couple of us, there was really nothing in the way of competition. Again, we had very little interference from banks and telecoms. When I speak about the challenges of the of the fintech now, you'll see why that was a very important factor. The now. Where are we now? What are the current opportunities? There's a number of them. So many, and I think everyone should take advantage of this. Everyone in this room should really take advantage of that. There's a lot of demand for banking services, and the proliferation of mobile technology makes it possible to grow. The growth, I do not think there's any Ugandan now above the age of 18 who doesn't have either a mobile phone or some way of accessing digital services. That's a fact. The merchant space is growing. Merchant here used in the strict sense is anyone that is selling goods or services and wants to be able to receive a payment, some sort of payment for their goods or services. And that space is growing. We have an industry that sells and buys. And so in the merchant space, there's quite a lot that still needs to be done. There's growth in e-commerce. My colleagues talked about it here. The public sector, and I'm glad I see someone from NITA, Mr. Chirenga. Public sector and the need for e-government. Everyone now, because they are tech savvy, because they are literate, because they have all of this, are beginning to demand that government services should be online. And for me, that's an opportunity for growth in this sector. There's now regulation which streamlines operations and levels the playground. Now again, this is a double-edged sword. It's good that there is regulation that's coming in. I think on March 28th, the bill from Parliament went to the President and is waiting assent for the National Payment System law to come into effect. And so that will regulate the way the industry operates. That has both its benefits and some of the, some bad, not so good things. Of course, the work from home thing that my colleagues also alluded to is a very, very big benefit. I do not think for a moment that we are going back to the way things were. This is the new normal. Get used to it. And so the work from home thing is a big advantage. We might look at it, again, it's how you approach it, whether with apprehension or with anticipation. My challenge here is let's look at it with anticipation, because it's not a foreboding of bad things, but for us in the industry, it's a way to make ourselves more relevant. Of course, internet is now very cheap. It's a dime a dozen, and you have everyone coming to sell you internet, and the price wars have driven it down, so it's a good thing. The national backbone now is, every year they are adding on, it's reaching every corner of the country, so there's really a big benefit there. High literacy rates. 13 years ago when we started, which is 2007, 2006, we didn't have as many literate people as we do now. Now everyone is literate, everyone is able to consume our services. And then, of course, things like the open APIs, the modular loops, open source technology that everyone has access to. Again, these are not exhaustive, but these are some of the biggest opportunities we have as an industry to leverage. What are the challenges? And they are not few. Let me quickly run through those. Now regulation is going to make it a bit harder to start. You have to go through a whole licensing regime, and some of the items, and I was lucky to contribute to the bill, and we resisted some sections of the bill, particularly section 68, that made it a bit more harder for a young man with a laptop in a university room that has a good idea. I felt the bill was very stifling for such a person, which is how many of us began. So regulation, like I said, is a double-edged sword. It has its good things, it has its bad things. I think it's also one of the bad ones. Of course, regulation stands in the way of innovation. We have erratic regulations and rules sometimes that come up that are very disruptive, and hopefully now with common voice we can be able to confront some of those. Price wars that are coming out of competition. Everyone is going into the same space. And so your price per unit, or price per, when you're pricing your products, you have to be very cognizant of what else is there in the market. So competition has brought prices down. And the problem with that is that it's a race to the bottom. The newest guy will always try and offer the cheapest price for what seems like the same product, but you know, it's an inferior product and so on. And then, of course, bigger players trying to go it themselves. Many banks are now saying, wait, can't we start off a fintech ourselves? Telecoms are saying, can we go for direct connectivity? And so where previously the fintechs played in the space of bridging the providers, banks and telecoms, to say utility companies or other businesses, these guys are saying, can we go direct to that business and cut out what they see as the middleman, which is the space for the fintechs? Of course, it's in futility, but ultimately it's something that we need to consider. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rona Desire, the MD Pegasus. You can please remind, because we're going into our second panel. You can take a seat up here. Yes, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're having a good time. We are live on Smart 24 TV and NTV as well. And we're going into our second panel, and allow me invite Innocent Kawoya as the CEO of High People and co-founder. Please a hand clap. We have got Ronald Dazere, who is already at the panel, and Peter Kakoma, CEO Kanzukot, and John Baptist Ocheng, team leader Craft Silicon. Please take up the seat as we proceed. Yes, you know, financial service providers, for them to very well be transparent in their services, there needs to be at least a software or softwares involved. And in this panel, we look at how we look at how safe is open source software for financial services. And with me, Rita Kabanyoro.
Could we have a lady? It's an all-male panel. Good.
You see how it works? I had to move very many times. Always learn to handle situation from very many angles and very many challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, before you, like I introduced to them earlier, we now will begin with the Kanzu code right here. You'll tell us what is the open source concept. Is it related to the open APIs?
Thank you very much, Rita. So the open source concept is generally, at the heart of it, is saying that when a piece of software is built, whatever that software is, whether it's a website or a platform, the inner workings of that software are available to anyone else who might want to use it. So the code behind that, what used to be referred to as the source code, that was used to build that software, is available for anyone else who might want to use it. So think of it like if you went to a restaurant and you had a nice meal and you enjoyed it, you also have access to the recipe, the detailed recipe from the chef on how that software was built, so that you can also do that, pretty much rework that, build that same thing yourself. So you have access to the code.
Okay, thank you so much. Innocent Kawoya is the CEO of High People. How does open source work?
Thank you, Rita. Open source has lived around us for so many times and so many years. I'm sure so many developers, so many implementers of solutions have heard of solutions like Ubuntu, like Putty, like Apache, and MySQL that I'm sure every financial service provider uses at the back end of developing financial solutions. And of course, the web, typical, as long as someone is running a dynamic website, maybe more than 95% of all the dynamic websites leverage open source like MySQL. It is solutions that come with a lot of democracy, a lot of transparency, and they give an open room for everyone to innovate and make sure we make the world better with technology.
Thank you very much. John Baptist Ocheng, are people's funds safe with the open source? What do you think?
Okay. My take about that is, I think any code, whether open source or closed source, is not is secure. So the question is, how secure is the code? So you might find that most financial institutions have contracts with fintechs, but that contract does not guarantee security for the platform. So the question is, how secure is the open source software that you're using?
Okay.
Yes. So what companies should do is personally review security of these open source softwares, and they can be as secure as the closed source.
Very well, thank you. And now we have got the open source software Modulope. Ronald Azire, share with us, how can Modulope, the open source, help markets like Uganda?
Thank you. Let me start off with a bit of an anecdote. If you're in this room and you're over 30, I guarantee at some point you owned a Nokia phone. Sure. Conversely, if you're in this room and you're over 30, in the last 12 years, I don't think your main phone has been a Nokia. It's not, I guarantee you that. You probably have owned it either for legacy reasons or nostalgia, but it's not your main phone. And why is that? A study was done to understand why Nokia fell as a leading phone manufacturer. And it was actually discovered that Nokia still makes some of the best telephones as far as the hardware is concerned. The problem is they had a proprietary operating system called Symbian, which no one could develop for. So you had very good phones running an operating system that only Nokia could develop for. You couldn't go and develop an app to run on a Nokia phone. And so the wisdom of people like Google was to say, let's have an open source operating system that runs on phones that anyone can develop for. And the wisdom in that was to suggest that the team at Google or whoever owns, perhaps let's even take an example of Nokia, whoever owns that software, the proprietary software, can never develop quick enough or fast enough to the level that the entire world can develop. Because now with...
Very, very well.
So the way you got, and to answer your question directly now, when we have open source, firstly, of course, it fosters uniformity. It means all of us are going to largely run off the same thing. I could hire a developer tomorrow and he will come and slot in on what something else was doing yesterday because they all understand the platform. But more than that, it allows many people now to cleverly contribute to that software and to do apps and to innovate, and because the platform is there. So what Mojaloop or people like that and open source will then do is it gives you the platform on which to dream. It's a blank canvas in which you dream and do anything. So it fosters innovation, it fosters uniformity, the ability for me to change tomorrow to go and pull another developer who's been using that operating system, rather that open source software somewhere, and bring him into my operations, and there will hardly be any learning time. He'll just slot in and continue working. Of course, also it's free. So it's a bit cheaper than if you had to go and buy proprietary software. Okay. So the benefits are immense.
All right, thank you so much. We have also seen the transitions from Nokia to now we have very many Samsung and very many on board, of course. Let's begin with Peter. We see now the transitions in the country. Is Uganda ready for the open source software?
Well, more than just open source software, is Uganda ready for software generally or technology generally? I think open source is probably just a subset of that.
You could please get closer to the microphone, please.
Sorry, thank you. So I think as the keynote captured, there have been a number of challenges in getting people to transition, but we've started to transition more and more, and the pandemic has actually forced us to jump even faster into things we were taking our time getting into. Open source is just a sub-component of that. It has several advantages, and yes, we're definitely ready for it, and because of the cost of building from scratch, it's one of the things we're inadvertently going to have to take up and start to use, because as we start to run after technology, we don't necessarily have the benefit of building from scratch, because that costs a lot. So whether we are ready or not, it's one of the things we are going to have to adopt a lot more of, given where we are as an economy, given where we are as an ecosystem. It's something that we are going to have to use a lot more of.
Okay.
That's how.
Okay, Innocent, please share with us your take on if Uganda is ready for the open source.
Well, Uganda has been ready and has been using open source. Like Ronald noted, we didn't adapt Nokia phones because we preferred something that we can easily use. The same way you see an iPhone only keeping as a prestigious device, but the others that allow you to plug in, have the same chargers, do everything in a very shared environment. are still adapted to by Ugandans and Africans in general. So in brief, Uganda has been ready for open source for a number of years, maybe more than 20 years. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ronald, please. What is your take on that?
There's a common saying, ready or not, here I come. So I think whether we are ready or not, it's the way to go. Open source is the way to go. But I think, to agree with my colleague, I think we've been ready a while, and with higher levels now of literacy and a lot of interest in computing, and of course the prices of open source being so low, I think Uganda has been ready a while, and we are good to go.
Okay, thank you so much. Please, John Baptist, share with us your take on that.
I think we are ready as Uganda. So the big question here is how we can strategically use open source to deliver product to the financial market. So you find, for example, when banks right now can maybe your core banking system, you're not allowed to host it in an open source software. So if we have financial institutions adopting this open source software and contributing to it, you'll find that other brands will embrace it, and it can really push delivery of financial institutions in the country.
Okay, as someone from the audience prepares to come, maybe if there is any question, let's proceed with Innocent there. John Baptist brought something that the question is how strategically can we adopt the open source? What do you think?
Strategically, as you may see, and I'm personally very thankful to the pioneers in financial technology like Pegasus, Your Uganda, Craft Silicon, for actually, and all the participants of the 40 Days for the Fintechs. Such events are meant to get us even more ready for adapting tools, emerging technologies like open source software, like Mojaloop, and many others that are going to come. It is our role to make sure that when there are many of these that are emerging and are helpful, after having very good assessment of the stakeholders, we make sure everyone gets to have a share of them and make use of them as much as we can. Of course, one of the things I'm sure it is being done at Pegasus, a lot of training is done, but we're also collaboratively going to create an environment that allows every interested developer, every interested person in making sure we create solutions of open source, trained free of charge, so that there is nothing like someone saying we don't have knowledge or we cannot be able to adapt. So I can take that for granted from a high people point of view.
All right, thank you. Peter, do you have a thought about the strategic adoption of it?
Yes, I do. I feel that given where we are, strategically, we should be taking advantage of a lot of the open source software that already addresses a lot of the core issues. So while the early players, for example, now in the fintech space, we had a lot of the early adopters doing what we have in the aggregation space. Taking advantage of something like Mojaloop allows a new entity to piggyback on existing software and run miles ahead. What that means is a startup in a month can have software that allows it to do remittances, secure software that allows it to do remittances from Uganda to Canada, something that took the early runners in this space years to build. And I'm sure Ronald will actually back this up. Things like WordPress will allow you in 5 minutes to set up your own online shop and start receiving payments. So as opposed to trying to go into, strategically, we should be very focused on doing things that are pushing communities that are already running with open source software. So communities pushing WordPress, communities like what High People is doing here, pushing Mojaloop, communities that are pushing Linux as an operating system. So all communities that are being deliberate about training, about pushing adoption, that are doing education, so that more and more people are making use of this.
Thank you so much. Ronald, you said something earlier that ready or not, we are ready. Do I take it for the strategy as well?
I think the previous speaker has summed it up very well. Again, remember there needs to be also an incentive for people who are contributing to this open source. So it's a shell and everyone is adding to it. And we need to have a culture where we begin to contribute to some of these things. I don't know if there are any Uganda. I have a friend, he contributed to the Linux music player called Amarok. And now when you load Amarok, his name shows up among the credits. Can we as Ugandans begin to contribute to some of these things? And when we have forums like this, can we have a chance for people to come and shout out their success and say, look, on the Moja Loop software, I added a functionality that does anti-money laundering, for example, or does velocity checks on transactions. And as he said, that's something that we then all adopt. We are in the same industry, we pass transactions, but is there a standard way of doing velocity checks on transactions? If you add that bit to the existing software that wasn't there, can you be credited? Can you be given a forum like this to come and make noise about what you've made and be recognized for it? Again, because it's open source and free, of course, there will be no pecuniary reward in terms of finances, but at least the ability for you to be recognized for the achievement you've done and adding a brick to the layer of knowledge in the software. Right. So I think that's important.
All right, thank you so much. And now we have got a question from the audience. You can step over, please. And you direct it to whom you want it to go. Your name first.
My name is Jonathan Kamoga from the East African newspaper. My questions could go to all of you or any of you can answer them. Asking from a layman's perspective, I would like to understand what is open source software. Where in Africa is it working, with examples maybe. And what would be the cost of implementing open source software in a market like Uganda? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will direct the question to Innocent Kawoya, the CEO High People, since they are the inventors of Mojalop, the open source in the country.
Oh, we're not the inventors.
Oh, yes.
We're partners to the community.
Partners. Thank you. Thank you.
We are advent supporters of open source.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll explain open source in a very layman's language. Open source is a supermarket that allows everyone to have a store, sell whatever they want, the way they want it, and make sure they make it look better every single day. I would say it in a layman's language. I would maybe ask Ronald to speak about where it is in Africa, and maybe my other colleagues can speak about the rest. Yeah.
Okay, I think the commonest form really of open source is Linux. South Africa, for example, has its own distribution of Linux called Ubuntu, which was born out of universities. And this was open source that was put on university computers for everyone to play with. And many other people added onto it and became a very rich brand of Linux. So that's for me is the commonest bit. Someone already spoke about MySQL. I don't know if MySQL really is open source. I know it's free software, but I don't think you can go in and change the functionality. For example, how it indexes or how it, I'm not too sure it would qualify as open source. But ideally, open source is something you can download and enhance. The same way all of these telephone companies, for example, pick Android OS. And each of them does something clever with it. It remains Android, but every phone, whether it's a Techno or it's a Samsung, or they all take the very same source code, which is Android iOS, and play around with it, and then come up with their own operating system that runs on your phone. So for me, those are the commonest forms of open source. For telephones, Android; for computers, Linux.
All right, thank you. Peter, what do you think?
I'll add just another example. So you asked about what does it cost. Open source is free. Really, every time you're using any app on your phone, either that app, the code that built, because all apps come from code, either the code that built that app is available publicly on the internet or it's not. So the moment it's available publicly on the internet, it is open source. So that's literally what it means. So what Ronald pointed out is when you're using your Android phone, just know that the code that built Android, the Android operating system, is available publicly. And what these big companies do is they get it and modify it before making it available on your phone. Every time you use Firefox as a browser, that is open source software. If you've heard of WordPress, that is an open source tool. So it's already available, it's free. What changes is when you asked about how much does it cost, it's free, but then people get it and adopt it and make it available to you commercially in different ways. So a local startup here selling websites can start to use WordPress because it's free, but then make a website available to you for, I don't know how much, at a subsidized cost. But to build it for you, they are not building it from zero. They are getting open source software and modifying it for your needs.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Let's cross to John Baptist.
Okay, just to add on what the panelists have said, there is also a lot of open source software on software as a service platforms. So this is software that you do not install on your computer, but you can access it over the internet, and you can also contribute to it.
Thank you so much. We have got another question from the audience. Please come on.
Hello everyone. Simon Alo is my name. I'm a software engineer by profession. Now, my first question comes, I'll summarize it. We talked about open source, but we have known that open source software usually come with challenges of security, even with Windows, Linux, Ubuntu, everything. What assurance are you giving us that it's going to be secure? The other part is the compatibility part. We're building different platforms. You have Android, you have Ubuntu, you have macOS. How sure are we that the softwares that you're building will be very compatible with the different platforms that we run? And what's the purpose of you bringing open source in Uganda? What will you gain if you're making it open for everyone? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I think, Innocent, you'll take up the first question.
Oh, thank you. Maybe I'll speak directly to open source, that is Mojaloop. Maybe firstly, Mojaloop was designed as a reference model for payment interoperability. And as Mojaloop as an open source is available for developers, software engineers, tech companies, governments, NGOs to either adapt by picking only ideas and things that it does, or instructions or specifications, or pick its code, work with it, and modify it to anything customized that you want to provide as a solution, or adapt all of it, pick all of it, and use it as an entire open source to provide and develop for you an interoperable payment system. But it's typically a back-end solution that is supposed to be enabling services through a financial service provider. So in the end, as it helps us in creating and scaling the creation of interoperable payment solutions, as a developer, as a fintech, and as a software developer in any sense, you're supposed to come and look at Mojaloop in a sense of what is it able to serve and what is it not able to serve, first of all. But in the sense of its security and having the confidence of the community, is that unlike many other open source solutions that have been developed, Mojaloop has been put in a place with some guidance and support of a community that is supposed to be here for a long time. The community is able to critique, to analyze any adaptations and any code that is created of Mojaloop. And if something is supposed to be adapted as part of Mojaloop, it's supposed to be verified and in one sense certified. So in the end, we are sure and have confidence that there is some very good trust in the solution that will be customized and developed of Mojaloop.
Okay, thank you so much. Richard, share with us about the integration part of the Android.
You mean me? Okay.
No, please, from Pegasus.
Ronald,
sorry.
In terms of compatibility, well, you see, the interesting bit here is that, again, because it's open source, like I said, it offers you a uniform platform. So that already gives you the basis for compatibility. those of you that have developed mobile apps, you know that once you master the way of developing a mobile app for Android, it's the same whether that app is going to run on Samsung phone or an HTC or a Huawei phone. If you develop an app that runs, and that's the power of open source. If I develop an app that runs on Android, then it's agnostic of any of the hardwares or the distribution of Android that has been used. Of course, all of these proprietary phone makers have their own version of Android. But the important thing is if I develop my app to run on Android, it will run on any of those distributions by those. But the other thing about compatibility, really, in fact, the word is no longer compatibility in as much as it is interoperability. So we're no longer talking compatibility where my application should run on something developed by Yo Uganda, but we are talking about where my thing can interface or connect into something Yo Uganda has done if I need to reuse a service they have. Let's assume Yo Uganda has a connection into BOU, for example, and I want to reuse that. I don't have to develop it. I just have to ask them for an API that fires a request to them. They will take that request on. So that, for me, is the level that we need to be talking about. Not compatibility, but interoperability.
Yes, but interoperability, bringing them together in the closed loop. Now we're going into the closing remarks, taking each at 30 seconds, beginning with John Baptist.
Thank you. So I think open source is here for us to consume with the right code and open source that you choose. You can review it by yourself, and you can add features or remove some that you see are a risk to your platform, and deliver services very efficiently to the market.
Thank you so much. Peter, would you please give us your take from the discussion and also your closing remarks?
Okay. As you shared, I lead the team at Kanzu Code, and we are very, very big evangelists of open source. It's allowed us to piggyback and go miles ahead in a lot of things, but we're not just evangelists, we're also contributors. We contribute to Mojaloop. We're one of the first early adopters. We're already contributing to that ecosystem. We contribute to WordPress. We contribute also to Mythos, which is also a global platform for financial inclusion. So we are very sold out on this, and I would really encourage anyone, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, plug into these ecosystems, make use of this software, give back to it, and let's build systems that are changing our technology, not just locally, but globally, because of the work we're doing by giving back to these open source solutions.
Thank you so much. We cross to Innocent.
To the players, the stakeholders in the bigger picture, financial inclusion, time is for interoperability, and nothing is going to take us any step back. There is no more time for inventing things. We have to innovate. So we should all be thinking of making what we have better and not creating new solutions. And the easiest way, and I believe that is the only way to actually get the best success out of all this technology, is collaborating and, in a nutshell, thinking interoperability.
Thank you so much. And lastly, Ronald.
I think let's be deliberate about open source. Let's have forums like these that speak about open source. Let's have a person or group of people like high people who are bringing the industry together. Have a repository for some of these softwares. If someone wanted Mojaloop right now, where do they download it from? So let's be deliberate. Let's have a repository for that. Let's have forums or hackathons where people can add on to this software and come and brag about what they've added. Let us also make sure we have open source that speaks to the idiosyncrasies of the Ugandan setting. Let's stop adopting things from out there and trying to bring them here. Let's develop our own open source that does things and let people pick it up. Let's create for them rails that then they pick up and reuse. For example, rails for bill payments. That for me should be open source now, and people should pick that and play around with it. And it's something we should also put in our education system. For me, I think we are all converted, but we are siloed. Can this effort be unified, and we have a deliberate effort to push open source, and perhaps people like NITA can help us as they build their data center? Can they reserve space for a place where I don't have to even go to the internet? Locally, I can access by connecting to their network. I can access a whole set of different open source technologies that are out there and reuse them. So for me, I think let's be deliberate about this. Let's push it. Let's foster it in the industry, and let's contribute.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone watching, we have been discussing how safe is open source software for financial services. My name is Rita Cabanyoro, but coming up now is my co-host, King of Radio. As gentlemen, you follow me for a picture.
Thank you very much. Please, let's give them a hand of applause. All right. That's interesting right there. Like the future it is. The future is definitely going to be interoperability. Well, without wasting really more time, let me first welcome the head of operations at High People, HOP, Nicholas, to actually come and one more time and actually get to tell us, give his speech a little bit, and I'll be just right back to continue on with the panel. Let's give it up for Nicholas, please.
Yes, good afternoon. I didn't intend to come back, but due to what I've been told is public demand, I've been asked to redo my introduction earlier on. Thank you very much. Nicholas Kalunji is my name. I'm the Chief Operations Officer, High People. Mine is very simple, is to give a summary of what the project has been, what we have done. I give thanks to the people that have taken part. So like I said, the project started in May with open submissions. We received over 100 submissions of different players in the financial sector, financial technology to say that wanted to take part in the 40 Days for the Fintechs initiative. So we shortlisted originally 40, but at last hour, there is one that came with a unique idea which wasn't among the 100. That is an online salon, an online beauty center. So it became the 41st. So altogether from the 100, we had 41 companies taking part. So 40 Days for the Fintechs had 41 players. Without wasting a lot of time, these were the 41 companies we engaged with in order of 1 to 41. Kanzu Code, Malin Limited, Alphatech ICT Solutions, Bionic, Computing Palaces, Lusuku Online, YoTV Channels, True African, Socialend Africa, Citron, Chap Chap, Zopa Limited, Yugimat, Bullard the Financial Services, we had Enabling Financial Services, we had Craft Silicon, we had LG Consult, the owners of Nakase Online, we had Safe Border, we had Sente, we had Pegasus, we had Flutterwave, we had Jumia, we had Softbox, the owners of MyLib, we had Screen Technologies, the owners of Lend in a Box, we had Swipe to Pay, we had Jumo World, we had Gaze Online Learning, we had StarTime Solar, we had Mindset Coders, we had Yo Uganda, we had Hamwe East Africa, we had Merchandise Uganda, we had File Attacks, or rather File Tax, we had Yafe Online Salons, we had Flutterwave Group from San Francisco, we had Mwanjala, we had SoftPay, we had Coin Blockchain, we had Trustfinity, we had Frontier Alliance, and lastly, TradeLens Limited. TradeLens Limited was the 41st fintech, Yafe Online was the 40th fintech. So in that order, those are the 41 that took part. We want to thank the 100 that submitted. Unfortunately, we could only do 40. We wished we could do 1,000, but we didn't have enough time. So this year, 40 should have served. But this project doesn't end now. We are continuing engaging. We have platforms for all the 40 that have taken part. More projects are coming up, like my CEO said earlier. We have Women in Fintech hackathon. We have Inclusive One Summit, among others. Away from that, allow me to take this same opportunity to thank our second team of participants, rather partners. The first partners are the 100 that submitted and the 41 that took part. But again, that wouldn't have happened if there was no High People, the owner of the project. High People implements this as part of its Inclusive One program. Now, the Incredible program is implemented in partnership with Cross-Lake Tech, Modus Box, and Modular Foundation. Modular Foundation is the foundation that has brought on market what has been discussed here, the famous modular open source software. Lastly, but not the least, allow me also take this special opportunity to thank the government of Uganda. Because at the end of the day, without the government regulations, without the government support, and a government enabling environment, all we are doing cannot happen. So it is very important that we thank the government of Uganda, more so that this is happening at a time when COVID is causing havoc across the world. We are very happy that the government has done some great work to ensure that we are safe, but importantly, because government is the people, we are very proud that as Ugandans, we have tried to do our best to make sure that we stay safe. Lastly, allow me to thank the Almighty God, because again, I'm a Christian, yes. We know God is everything. Without God, nothing can happen. It is God that has given us the leaders we have. It is God that has given us the projects we are running. It's the same God that has brought us here. So in a special way, as we usually say at High People is sponsored by God, because we know God is first. As I conclude, allow me to tell you that the journey we started won't end, because like my CEO and my chairman repeatedly say, an economy that includes everyone benefits everyone. So you're going to work until we die to make sure that as many people as possible are included financially and digitally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please, another hand of applause for Nicholas. Speaking about inclusion, and of course, God being our sponsor. Praise the Lord, ladies and gentlemen. Praise the Lord. You guys are really cold, huh? The AC in here is really, huh? I'm King Wesley, King of Radio. I'm the PRO here at High People as well. And also, I'm a radio host and a TV host with Spirit Media. Now, speaking of going straight to what we're supposed to be doing, we're live on NTV right now and also Smart 24. And we'll be till around something like 1:30. Now, I want to go straight to the next panel discussion, and of course this one here, we want to talk about the state of Uganda's fintech industry, given the fact that actually these are 40 days and 40 fintechs. We're speaking interoperability, we're speaking including everyone, so we'll definitely dive straight into that, and I want to have my panelists right away. When I invite one by one, please let's clap for them as they come through. And I'll start with NITA Uganda's Head of Marketing and Communications, Mr. Stephen Chirenga. Please let's clap for him. I'll have the CEO, Innocent, please come forth as well, come back here. Mr. Innocent Kawoya, come through, and also Flatwave, let's have Nail Sim Sengo, the team leader. Thank you. The name should be, is it Sango, right? Oh yes, Sango. Okay, I'll also have True African, and we'll have the representative is Mr. Andrew Kasule. Thank you very much. And also I'll have Yo Uganda founder and MD Gerard Begumisa. Thank you very much. Please let's clap for them. All right, okay, thank you very much. Okay, how are you, gentlemen?
Thank you.
You good?
Very well. Yes. Very well.
Okay, well, this is quite interesting. I want to go to, let me see. I want to start with a big elephant in here. That's Nita, our boss. My question is going to be very simple. What are the opportunities?
All right.
Or where are the opportunities?
Okay. Thank you for that question, and a good afternoon to the audience that's tuned in. So I think the first opportunity, sad as it may be, is the fact that there's been a global slowdown owing to the COVID pandemic. Now, because of the different SOPs like, staying at home or having a social distance and reducing peer-to-peer interaction. For fintechs, this allow, the fact that fintechs are technology in nature, it allows for them to position themselves as being relevant in providing services to people who can't freely interact. So I think that's the first one. And in Uganda, we've seen an aggressive uptake of internet owing to the pandemic. We're about 27 million mobile phone users, but some of the services in different sectors, say for education. As an example, we run with UNICEF an e-learning platform. Now, the usage of this platform here increased by over 4,000% from when lockdown started. It's called Colibri. So in December, we had about 2,000 users, and in June, we had 94,000. So that is the impact that is, that has been achieved. So also as fintechs, I think the fact that there's an aggressive uptake of IT, now is the time for them to become relevant in positioning their services to be useful to the citizens.
All right, thank you very much. Now, speaking about relevancy, now, Sango here, I want to ask you, what are the challenges that we're facing so far?
Thank you so much for your question. I think, what happens is, in any market, when you're trying to do something that has not been done in that market, there's always challenges. One of the things that we are seeing specifically, at least as Flutterwave, is the consumer has, again, just like Stephen said, is the pandemic has forced people to adopt things that they ordinarily were fearing.
Oh, yes.
The people fear what they don't understand, right? And so what we saw was people initially just feeling, and when it comes to money, it's a bit sensitive,
Yes.
Just the feeling of my money is going to be moving through some virtual thing that I don't see. And hopefully it will get to where it's going. What happens when it's stuck? So we had scenarios where people would want to come to check your office before they can use your platform, just to confirm that if my money disappeared,
I know where to go.
I can find these guys. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, but that's one of the challenges. The second thing has been, of course, even with the adoption of mobile phones and smartphones and internet connectivity, there is still that issue of how do users then begin to come from a place where they're just sending money to each other to use it to transact, right?
Yes.
And also just how do you include everyone, even in the deepest, darkest corner of Uganda, right? And so that would be another challenge in just developing products, and especially like us where we sit, we are more at the infrastructure level. So we build infrastructure so that other people can build on it products. But many guys who are developing products are not going to that level where they're making something that will include someone who has even never, encountered a payment platform, right? And so we are in that kind of now mindset where we're saying, how can we guide from our learnings? How can we come alongside the people developing the products, as Flutterwave, from our learnings in the different countries across the world, to help them in the design process, to make sure that the products they're building are going to be used even by someone who doesn't even speak English, right? And I think these are the two key things. The other thing would be regulation, which is a double-edged sword. So, the thing was in the beginning, the fear was that the regulator would not be able to interact with the people who are actually building the products. But I must commend that government has done a great job in just coming to us and saying, okay, we want to regulate this space. We don't know what you guys are doing and how you're doing it. How can we make sure that we're protecting the person who's transacting, but also you as the business service provider? Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Now, I'll go to you, Mr. Andrew. The question is very simple. How best do we advocate for fintech to impact more sectors and lives?
Thank you very much. It's good that you brought Stephen over here.
Yes.
Mr. Chirenga, because I believe he has a very important role to play. First of all, I'll talk about the challenges. If we as fintechs are to survive, and if we build systems that are really meant to help the people down there, say people in the villages who are saving and transferring money to the commercial banks, we really need to have charges brought down. Our charges are too high. If we can have something to do with the charges coming down, it will be very, very, very helpful for us as fintechs and to the people who are on the receiving end of our platforms. The other issue would be about reduction of taxes on mobile phones. That is with to do with phone penetration. Most of the services that we're offering, most of the platforms that we are building are mobile-based. And if we are building platforms that are going to run on Android, USSD, we need phone penetration to go deep down in the villages. We've been doing some research with Strome Microfinance, and we've gone to places where you won't find a group that has a phone or has knowledge of how to operate a phone. So if we can have reduction on taxes of mobile phones, that will be very helpful for us. Maybe the other thing that I should talk about is the network coverage is still lacking. Not just up country. I'll give you a scenario of a place in Jungo, which is just after Natete along Kasanje Road. We were there and we didn't really have network coverage. And I hear mobile telephone operators bragging how they're in Karamoja, and yet places just over here are not covered. If we can have something to do with that, it will help us, because we are building platforms that are riding on their infrastructure. The other point that I should talk about is protection from foreign companies. We well know that the governments that will provide funding to some of their fintechs, and they will come here and they will influence. If we can have protection, I think that will be very helpful to us.
Okay. You spoke about the network coverage and all that stuff. It's amazing, by the way, how telecom companies keep on advertising how they got us all covered. And you go to some places, you're like, Lord Jesus. But anyway, that's quite interesting. And of course, the measures you've mentioned, the protection bit of it, and of course the taxation, and then the charges. Again, like, you know, people always really look at really using some of these fintechs at the same time vis-a-vis the amount of money they lose, they're going to, you know, lose in that particular process when they're exchanging. They're rather like, you know what, I'd rather not use these, you know, services and all that stuff. But now, speaking about that, so what training is best for a fintech stakeholders now? Again, go back to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I just want to just speak to what my colleague and friend has just asked. So I think it's important that we appreciate where he's coming from, because research shows that for every 4.6 increase in mobile data use, there is an increase of 10% in economic activity in a country. So it's important for fintechs to be able to fix the problem of access, because if you can access your service, then there's more productivity being achieved. And I'd like to just speak to it from from an elementary economics perspective. So on the one hand, as a nation, we had a problem of supply of internet. On the other hand, we have demand.
Yes.
Now, on the supply side, what we've done as a government is that, one, we have built a nationwide fiber network whose intention is to bridge the digital divide. And so far, we are at 4,000 kilometers of fiber and still growing.
Yes.
On the other hand, we have also brought in bulk internet to ensure that. Now, what this means for Omuntu wa bulijjo, for the bulk internet, is that the cost that the normal teleco charges today includes the cost that they procure the internet at from a global carrier.
Yeah.
Now, in us bringing the capacity to Uganda, we are able to charge them lower than what the global guys would charge. Now it means that the cost of internet, ideally, should be reduced because the telecom provider is making a saving in their input cost, and therefore they should be able to pass that cost saving in form of a price reduction. It hasn't happened as aggressively as it should be, but we are still engaging them to ensure, to see that we have them, translate the savings to omuntu wa bulijjo. Now, on the side of demand of the internet, yes, we know that there are taxes on phones, and as a sector, we've been advocating for the review of these taxes, excise and VAT, in light of trying to grow penetration. However, also as a sector, and as NITA, recently we partnered with the private sector to launch Uganda's first ICT assembly factory. Now, this factory here is assembling phones that are done locally, and these phones are exempt of VAT as part of support from the government to the private sector player. So this has, and we have seen that ever since we launched this factory in November last year, we have seen an increase of about 10% in the penetration of phones. So I think slowly by slowly, to Andrew's concern, we are beginning to see an increase in the number of phone owners, and relatedly, the addressable market of fintechs is also increasing.
Speaking about the locally manufactured phones here that are exempted from tax. Now, are they also exempted from all tax, even the usage of the phones, for example, OTT tax?
No, I think OTT is a tax that is there. Yes, it has had its shortcomings.
It has.
We are having a sector-wide conversation between ourselves as IT sector and the finance ministry to see how we can also review that, because it's not lost on us.
Well, the best way I fight most of these battles, since you guys are already in review, then I'll go and pray on my knees, and I'll pray that the outcome comes out totally positive for almost everyone. Again, what I asked a little bit earlier was what training is best for fintech stakeholders?
All right, so yes, sorry, I got carried away. So the training that is best, I think even from my previous, my panelists on my left, from Flutterwave. I think he shared that the biggest issue, a big concern is regulation.
Yes.
Because as fintechs, you're coming to a space that is fairly new.
Yes.
I think as fintechs, it's important that they understand the different cyber laws that speak to how you can exist in a cyber world.
Yes.
And I'm just, and as NITA, we are happy to partner with High People and 40 Days 40 Fintechs
yes,
to say that now, guys, let us have sessions where we can train you on the different laws.
Yes.
And this extends to the E-Transactions Act, the Data Privacy and Protection Act, the Computer Misuse Act, and the rest. So I think these laws here, once we understand them as fintech, we are able to ensure that whatever we do is compliant. And importantly, now in the age of consumer protection, there will be a lot of scrutiny around how these fintechs are using data that they collect from the users.
Yes.
Equip and upskill our partners in fintech on how to adhere to the different cyber laws. Secondly, again, because fintech is technology, there's an aspect of cybersecurity. So I think also from a perspective of just training and just sharing on safer ways of doing stuff online will be critical. And so we are happy to have that engagement.
Because that's a really interesting and the most important, I think, of all, being able to transact knowing that actually I'm safe. Instead of, all the time you're transacting and you have no idea who is at the back end, who can actually access your information at the back end to use it for whatever it could definitely be. Going to you, Mr. Jared, question is very simple. Now, you as also, what can I say? You as a fintech or as also an industry player, the question is, how is the regulatory environment like for you as on the recipient end?
Yes, thank you very much. As Yo Uganda being a 14-and-a-half-year-old technology company, we've had the privilege of being able to observe how the industry has evolved. Earlier speakers talked about how internet was in 2006 and compared with how it is now. I mean, what you're paying for, what you were paying for in 2006,
yes,
you now just pay a very small fraction of this. And I mean, our big idea in 2006 was in the communications space. And there was a regulatory change that was happening. And so we wanted to take advantage of that opening of the regulation and offer to the general public low-cost international calls. I mean, since then, our business And since then, we've seen this as a very significant area, very huge area for growth. I mean, 10 years have elapsed since then, but we still see that there's huge opportunity. The uptake of digital payment services and digital services in general is still low, and this is a huge growth opportunity. From a regulatory standpoint in relation to the payment space, we see that the regulator has actually been very supportive of innovation, because there are some markets where the regulator simply would say, stop what you're doing until we finish writing the laws, then continue. But in this case, the regulation has actually followed the innovation. I mean, the mobile money service was launched, and the guidelines for mobile money operations came into effect later, a few years later. And there has been further support from the regulator in terms of the development of the National Payment Systems Bill, which was passed last month and is waiting to be assented. And we also applaud the efforts in the passing of the National Local Content Bill 2019, which is actually quite important for our industry. Essentially what this or that is using natural resources in Uganda has an obligation to purchase locally. They would have local content obligations. They would need to prioritize local players. And I think this also speaks to the area that one of my colleagues mentioned relating to, I mean, he mentioned it as protection from foreign players, but I think this is one initiative from a regulatory and from a legal perspective that I think has helped the industry. So overall, I think the regulator has been quite supportive, and we applaud them for that, and we definitely urge them to continue with that support, continue along those lines, because a lot of these innovations might seem very small at first, but could have very huge impact in the country.
All right, thank you about that. And now again, I want to ask you, sir, that is government really playing its part? Do you think government is playing its part? As on the receiving end, well, I'll ask government whether they're also playing their part, but do you as a recipient?
I would say, my colleague Begumisa said,
yes,
government is following the industry.
Yes.
They are learning from what we are doing, and they're trying to build laws based on what we are actually innovating. So I should say that they are playing their role.
Government.
Thank you, Andrew and Jared. I think, yes, government is playing its part. Yes. However, I think it's also a collective effort.
Yeah.
And maybe, just to share that the efforts of the industry are not lost on us. On us. There's actually progress. And I'm happy to share that this morning, actually, we have released some good news for the industry, that our ranking as Uganda on the UN e-government ranking has improved, our online service index.
Oh.
So what this means by online service index, it means that as a nation, the UN has done a survey across the globe and has seen that Uganda is doing very good stuff digitally. We are providing services online from a government perspective, but also for the private sector. There has been an adoption of using the services, but also providing services. So I think as fintechs, the journey is not done, but I think already so far, we are getting applause from the UN in saying that Uganda, listen, you're doing well. And we've, and we've improved. I think the comment is that Uganda is an LDC, least developed country. However, it's in a bracket of a high online service index. So I think for me that's a very good thing for us to be aware of. Such that the late nights in coding and in enabling services, know that people are noticing and we're actually improving as a nation. So yeah, so I hope I've answered you.
Yeah, oh, you have, and of course, he's nodding his head. Sango is nodding his head. Are you in agreement?
I agree. I mean, yeah, just like you said. So the many innovators, always look, and these are guys who, or at least, who are not as informed. They always look at regulation as it's coming for them, right?
Yes.
But that's not the case. We must understand the role that we also have to play as innovators, as service providers. And that's why I agree, when he mentions the fact that it's a collective effort, first of all. I also must agree that they have tried to at least do a great job, right? In terms of, coming to the players and asking, what's happening, what can we do? And I know earlier, my colleague alluded to it when he was saying that he was actually quite involved in like the National Payments Systems Bill. And this is the only way we can see this going forward, right? Also, what I must say is that it's what regulation also does is it makes, because many innovators, especially in Uganda, they think of, developing things as though they're going to always be in that same place, in a small room behind closed doors. What this does is it gives you the perspective of what you need to be thinking of if you're going to do business at a global level, right? And for me, I'm really pro-regulation. If it's done in the right way, it cannot leave the industry the same way, because then the things that are, that it makes you think about are the same things if you cross the border to a country where you can't even push one transaction before everything is streamlined. You're then prepared to do business across the globe, and for me, that's why I am really, quite involved as well, in as much as I can, to see that, this is something that comes to life, because it will not leave the industry the same way.
Speaking of not leaving the industry the same way now, now we have, like the entire advocacy has been also more onto the interoperability, a bit of it now. Looking at the interoperable services, such as cross-network transactions are always on and off. Why is that so? I'll still go to you, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. If I may just say something small along the lines of training that was mentioned.
Training,
just
yes.
A quick one, very quick
one.
It's
okay.
Yes, so I think one of the stakeholders, I see three stakeholders in the fintech space: the consumers of the services, I see the producers of the solutions, fintech companies, then I also see the regulators.
The regulators, yes.
So for the fintech companies, I think, like one of my colleagues has said, some of these solutions, when they are produced, it is just one person in a room, and they might never imagine some of the things that they may need to start thinking about once it grows. And so I think training in these aspects, like what regulators expect, what customers expect, how to support them, and so on, is quite important through events like this that High People has put together, and even industry events. In terms of interoperability and the reasons for sometimes having downtime, I think when these mobile money services started, and when you look at payment services in general, you had few players in the market. So the way that these players would connect to each other would be each one linking to the other. But as the number of companies grow, you find that the number of relationships that one player has to put in place become very many, and they become very complicated from a technical standpoint, and this could lead to some of the downtime. And so this is where solutions like the modular loop system come into place. Through the adoption of modular loop, and perhaps with support from the regulatory standpoint in terms of creation of one or more switches, which fintechs can actually champion, and then having these operators connect to those switches, you would essentially reduce the complexity in the whole payment space, and that would reduce on the downtime as well. And so those are the thoughts I would have about that.
Do you concur, or you'd probably defer? What do you think? Where do you think where do you think we have these on and off so the interoperabilities?
I would concur with Gerard, and maybe some of the other reasons why these platforms are always down. Like I said, they have so many relationships, and the relationships that they build come with some challenges. For example, float management, and we always have system downtimes. That is a very big problem.
Yeah. So you said systems?
Systems.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. Thank you. You have anything to add on that?
No, I mean, so I've really been privileged to also, experience that because of the work at Flutterwave. We are in today 15 African countries, licensed and transacting and plugged in, because the vision is similar to what Mojaloop is now trying to do on the open source side. And you find, again, just like, Mr. Begumesa mentioned, is that, you're plugging into so many different systems. And the issue with that is that even as your business grows, right, and the users grow, there's also a higher demand on your system, right? So what happens is that those downtimes can be as a result of the system, right, but also as a result of your growth, individual growth, right? And so you find that as the economy, for example, if you look at like this time we had of COVID-19, of course the downtime was increasing because of course the users woke up one day and said, let's try this thing, right? And so you find that if it's not the system that's breaking, the logistics is breaking, the movement of money, and that's why many, again, innovators believe that they're trying to kick out the bank, but the money has to be somewhere, right? And that there's also actual movement of money on the back end. And sometimes you find that key players in the value chain are not willing, especially if you're not big enough to make that call and say, advance me money for this transaction to happen. Some key players will not want to let a transaction go through without you actually giving them value.
Yes.
And so, but as we begin to, again, have this kind of conversations with all the key players and figure out how can we better optimize, the way the whole value chain is working, I know that where we are now is not where we used to be, because it was way worse, right? And so you find that Uganda is actually one of those countries where we are really fast tracking, in terms of just adoption. I know that from other countries where we're operating, people are coming to see what's happening here, to benchmark on what to do in their countries.
Wow.
That even though we complain of the downtime, we should be cognizant and appreciate the fact that we are still one of the countries where, things, at least we're able to innovate quickly, because again, the regulation has allowed us to play in this space before, closing us off before they understand what's happening. Yeah.
Well, as a regulator, Mr. Stephen.
All right, so I think, thank you for that. I think Gerald had mentioned the fact that the industry has grown.
Yes.
And from a perspective of integration, you now have so many points to integrate to. And as government, what we have done is that we are now building an integration of government systems platform, such that as the fintech, you won't have to go and have multiple integration points with different entities. This means that now using one platform or unique identifier, such as national ID, you can be able to authenticate one's identity to be able to offer them a service. This platform here will be available for the fintech industry once it's ready. And also what we've done is that because we appreciate the fact that we need to have a standard build of these services here.
Yes.
We have also developed a government-wide enterprise architecture framework, such that as a fintech, if you need to, maybe call in a service of a particular entity, maybe say Lands Ministry or URA, you can have the confidence that the API has been built in a way that can be consumed. The government, we are up to the task. And yeah, so I think good days are on the way.
Hallelujah. Now, from your Uganda, I'll ask this: that why is the level 1 principle of real time, immediate funds transfer key for fintechs to advance financial inclusion?
Yes, thank you. One of the things that we've seen since we started offering services in the financial services space is that customers actually want to see something happening before they really accept that it works. And so this really is what speaks to the whole real-time aspect. So the real-time transfer of funds is very critical to get widespread adoption of the services. And in turn, financial inclusion, in a general sense, would actually rely on widespread adoption of these services. I mean, in the past, when you looked at the credit card services, merchants were okay with receiving their funds the next day. So people transact, they swipe their cards, and then the next day, the funds go into their bank account. But these days, the questions which the customers ask us is that when someone pays me cash, I receive the cash immediately. So when I'm paying digitally, I also want to see that money immediately on my bank account. And so that is, this whole real-time fund settlement is a very big part. It has a very big part to play in acceptance of these solutions. The world generally has changed in terms of what people's expectations are. People expect instant things these days, and you cannot tell them to wait until evening. I mean, we've tried to convince some customers to wait until the evening, but they said no, and they say they want their funds in their bank account immediately someone transacts with them. So I see it as a very critical part that would lead to widespread adoption and finally financial inclusion.
From Flutterwave, what do you think?
I agree, because again, especially I would have seen in Uganda, just growing up here, is that people, the economy is largely driven by small and medium enterprises. And most of these businesses, at least with my interaction, the money they make on that day is partly what they're using even to provide the service, right? And so they want it to hit the account in real time. The other thing which I could add is just the expertise that even a business which wants to collect money, and if you just give them an API, they won't know how to consume it because they are not even having that expertise in-house. So what I urge, like many of the players is, let's begin to also think of the customer we're building for. One thing we saw in this season of the lockdown was we are able to collect money from all payment platforms, right? But the adoption still was the rollout time was still not as fast. So what we did is we built a product called Flutterwave Stores. And what that did was, for the small business, it's a template of a store. So when you come today and say, I want to collect payments from my customers, you don't need to build a website, right? You get that template, you put in the photos of your product, you put in the price. We're plugging into our customers who are doing deliveries. Right? So Safe Border, Pink Tie, Pink Cloud. And so as a small business, once you plug in and sign up today, put in your products, if someone buys from you, we trigger the delivery company. They come to your house, pick up the product and deliver it, and you get your money. Now, from the time that the lockdown happened to date, we have had 4,500 small businesses. Who ordinarily would think, if I'm going to collect payments online, I need to get a website, get a website designer, figure out how I'm going to get the border guys to deliver these products. And yet this value we can, because we have in-house talent, which many fintechs here have, you can build a product like that you don't think of charging people on the onset, but as they transact, you're making money. And so for me, I believe that would have been a hindrance, that the expertise, that then if we begin to come out as innovators and say, okay, looking at the context of my customer, what can I build on top of just payments or just logistics to add value to what I'm doing and what they are doing? There's a sweet spot there. There's so many amazing things we can do as guys who are rolling out these services.
Wow, thank you very much for your contribution. It's been beautiful really having you. And of course, at least each one of you out there who are really watching us on TV, you definitely would learn one or two, three things. And I definitely want to thank you very much for coming through. Let me invite the CEO, hi people, Mr. Innocent Kawoya, to definitely come and give us closing remarks. And then we see what's up. And should I see the champion, Golola, is in the building, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, King of Radio. I request all of us to stand up. I know that above everything, the only one we first have to thank is the Almighty God for making this happen. But I know it's always hard to tell people, and great people in that sense, to stand up. because everyone is a king in their own kingdom, and we have queens here that are queens in their own kingdom somewhere. But on behalf of High People, on behalf of everyone, the 41 fintechs that participated, the regulators, I request all of us to give a hand of applause to everyone for participating. I know I cannot thank you so much, but on behalf of our partners, Cross-Lakes Technologies, Modusbox, Mojal Foundation, and our funders, the Gates Foundation, I wish to extend a very great message of thanks to you for participating, because even when we had the funding, if we didn't participate together and come to discuss and openly talk about our own industry, we would not make this happen. Thank you so much. I hope we keep engaging. We have the Women in Fintech Hackathon and Summit coming, the 7th Digital Impact Awards Africa, the Include Everyone Summit and Digital and Financial Inclusion Summit all coming through. I wish we can keep coming and converge together. For the fintechs, you always have a free ticket and an open invite for all of us. It's our event, it's High People, it's a fintech, so all of us have a free gateway. Thank you so much, and may God bless you. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. You will all be, lunch will definitely be served, so you'll receive a coupon, and then we'll all go dine together. Other than that, thank you very, very much. Please, gentlemen, thank you very much. You definitely follow me also as well for a group photo and also some